Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today for getting more first conversations confirmed. Look, we've all been there. We've all had scenarios in which we've been trying to get to somebody, sometimes very, very desperately, other times just because it's part of our job. And we think they should be calling us back. We think they should be sending us back email. We think they should be communicating with us on some level, and they don't. Well, common wisdom says that everyone's the same. And if you approach them all with good processes in the same way, that you're going to get them to call you back. Common wisdom says that if you've got the best apparatus, the best software, the best service, the best XYZ for that person, then they're going to call you back. But what we find in real life is that is not the case. What we find in real life is that no matter how well you have done in identifying the other person and that other person should be the right person for you to talk with, that person doesn't always call you back. And in fact, in some areas, it becomes one of the most difficult, one of the most time-consuming things that you can do. There are a number of reasons why we might want to have a first conversation, and I've got 4 of them. There are probably many more up here on the board. The first 2 are sales related, business development for new prospects, or maybe to add new people that you're already working with them or their company, but you want to add somebody who's in the decision loop. It could be because you're trying to do better customer service so that they can use your product or service better, but that you can't get to the proper person because they're too busy. Or it might be that you're looking for a job or looking to enhance your career, whether it's for now or whether it's something where you're just trying to set it up through networking or because of some other reason, but there are lots of good reasons. Could be for your kid's school. There are lots of good reasons. I've added 4 of those that are most likely on here. Now, I'm David Radin, the president of M Masters Corporation, and we also have a tool called Confirmed, which we launched recently. And I've got some background in the area, both in training people on how to do leadership and how to work with processes and how to work with sales and business development. And I've got with me Shannon Gregg, who is actually manning the dashboard today. Thank you, Shannon, for being with us. And thank you all too for being with us today. We hope we're going to be able to add some capability for you that you can get these conversations to happen better, to happen more effectively, and frankly, maybe even a little bit more efficiently. We'll talk a little bit about what the differences are between those and why it works. But that's what we're going to be doing in this particular session. Now, in today's conversation, we will be spending most of the time talking about it as if it is part of a sales process. As we looked at the people who have registrants, we see many of you are in a business development type of position or heading a company, in which case business development and customer attainment is important. Now, there may be some of you who are looking to get that conversation for other purposes, such as to get that new job, or because you're hoping to help a certain nonprofit that you need to have, that you need to get to, or maybe even going to your neighbor. Some of the techniques that we are going to be talking about today will be helpful for you in a lot of those ways. Others will be concentrating on the sales, business development, revenue attainment, customer acquisition type of mode, which I suspect most of you will like the idea of. Now, I have up here a diagram that we call the 360-degree sales machine. And the idea behind this diagram and the sales machine is that if you're running a business development or a sales type of operation, or if you're running a company that has one, which chances are if you're running a company or an organization of any size, you probably do, you need to look at these 5 areas, because if any one of them is not functioning properly, your sales attainment, your revenue drive, your scalability will be significantly hampered depending upon which of these and how badly it goes and which ones are missing. It could be more and more hampered. If you've got all 5 of them really performing top notch, it's almost like a a car with cylinders, where if everyone's holding their own weight, or it's like a crew shell where if everybody's pulling their own weight on the oars, then you have a better operating machine, everything works better. Today's conversation is going to attack the top three. We're going to talk about some areas that affect strategy, that affect process. And then we've also got at least one tool that we can talk to you about, which we think you're going to like, called Confirm. But we'll talk about that one at the end, and you'll see how it works and how it'll help you in a lot of these areas. So first, let's talk about what a first conversation is and what it's there for. So in a sales or business development standpoint, a first conversation is the one that gets you going. They may or may not know that you have something for them and you need to get a conversation going. A lot of times it comes because you've gotten a list of people. A lot of times it's because you've gotten a referral. Lots of different ways to do it. Well, there are things that we've learned traditionally about these first conversations. Number one is that even under normal circumstances, and in today's business environment, we are not in normal circumstances. But even under normal circumstances, it normally will take you between 8 to 23 attempts, depending upon which of these surveys and which of these studies that are out there. There's a lot of research on it. In order to be able to get somebody to even respond and say, yeah, I'm willing to talk to you. That first step usually takes somewhere between 8 to 23 times. And today, in this COVID environment, it's actually harder. Under normal circumstances, there's lots of noise. There's a lot of things going on that will keep them from saying yes, or maybe even keeping them from hearing you. And we're finding that now, as I said, it's even harder than normal. So if we think about it versus, today versus the emerging new normal, which we don't really know what to call it. Is it a new normal? Is it a COVID environment? Is it a post-COVID environment? Whatever it is, there's still some speculation as to what it really will become, but we'll call it the emerging new normal for the most part. And today we're finding that the normal places where we would find people in order to have these first conversations have dried up a little bit. They're not quite as many of them as we have had in the past. They're not where they were in the past. We're not there. There are a lot of issues related to that. We're finding that there are fewer real prospects. Now, why do I say fewer real prospects? Well, look at the numbers. We've got so many millions of people who were laid off from their normal jobs that the people who are remaining have got to pick up their slack. So therefore, there are fewer real prospects. There are fewer people who are buying. And one of the things that really throws it's like a knife in my heart at this particular point. But one of the reasons that I hear from people why they're not buying or why they're not trying to get those conversations is because they don't think they have budget, or they're not sure they have budget. What's keeping them from going forward, they say, is not necessarily because they don't have the money. It's not necessarily because they don't have the need, but in many cases, it's because they're not sure. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are fewer people there that they can go to get information to know whether they should be sure. They don't have their normal channels that are there. Therefore, there are fewer of them. Your communications channels are being squeezed. Their communications channels are being squeezed. You can't reach them as easily, especially if you were used to calling them at their company by phone and trying to get to them through some switchboard or through some published number, because they're working at home. They're probably using their own cell phones. In some cases, perhaps they've gotten a more sophisticated phone system, but what's happening is your channels are getting more difficult and there's more competition. Now, when I say there's more competition here, there may in fact be more product competition, but that's not what I'm talking about here. There is more competition for exposure now because those first four factors have forced everybody to use new concepts online. They're forcing more people to try to make phone calls. They're forcing more people to try to get to you through Zoom webinars like this one. And you want to know something? It's harder because there were so many people doing that the listing services are making it harder to find the ones you want. There were so many people out there who were putting out vague characteristics in their descriptions that when you look at the listing's now 40 long instead of 3 or 4 long as it normally would be, because you can't differentiate between those that you should be going to and those that you shouldn't be going to. Therefore, the people who are putting them on, using them for communications channel, are finding an issue with getting to the people. So there are a lot of new issues related to the new emerging normal that we're seeing, as if it wasn't tough enough to begin with. The statistics that I'm showing you here are pre-COVID statistics. You can see the lowest of those numbers that I talked about before. It takes 8 cold call attempts in order to reach a prospect, according to Serious Decisions. Some of those, and I took the lowest, as I said, some of those are as high as 23 that I've seen, and they generally land in that range. We also see that 80% of sales require 5 follow-up calls in order to be able to get the second meeting. Now, that may not be intuitive to you. You think to yourself, hey, I got the meeting, I'll get the next meeting without a problem, but you still run into a lot of the same issues that you do getting the first meeting when you're trying to get follow-up meetings. And then the third one that I'll just point out, the others you can look at yourself, is that 44% of sales reps give up after 1 follow-up. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to look at that first statistic and that third statistic and say, wow, it takes 8 attempts and almost half of people give up after the first. I can almost guarantee you that the 44% of the sales reps that give up after the first are likely to be least successful, because it's going to take them normally 8, and they're not even 1/8 of the way there of what they would standardly anticipate doing. And one of the reasons why they don't do it is because it's hard. One, it's because they don't want to sound like or feel like a pain in the butt. One of the reasons is because they don't know if they're getting through to the person. We're going to talk about all those and how getting the first conversation can be aided in several ways by several different types of tactics. So under normal circumstances, this might be what your meeting might look like. It could be at your office, at somebody else's office. It could be at a coffee shop. It could be an interview. It could be a sales meeting. It could be some other type of meeting that will help you go forward, but it might look like this. On the other hand, these days we see a lot more that look like this. I know that, and I chose this, by the way, this particular image, because I thought it was, number one, fun and cool because it's Star Wars, and a lot of people love Star Wars. But I thought about the image and I thought, wow, this really says a lot. First of all, it says we're in a different place than anyone could have anticipated. You know, when George Lucas was doing Star Wars, he wasn't anticipating that one of his main character sets was going to start to have this kind of figure with somebody superimposing a mask on them. It just wasn't in something that they would think about. We're in a new reality compared to where we were before. But we're also seeing that they're social distanced. We're also seeing that there are 2 different people with 2 different sensibilities. One says, I have to wear a mask. And one of them, the guy scratching his head, says, I don't need to wear a mask. Or maybe I left it at home or what have you. And what we're seeing is that there's a heterogeneity here. If you're the guy on the left, you got to deal with people like you, and you got to deal with people like the guy on the right. If you're the guy on the right, you got to deal with people like you and people who are on the left. So your meeting set will look very different. It'll be very broad, and you don't know until you get to them what's on the mind or what the other person's reality looks like. And as you know, in today's environment, reality is a bit distorted and looks a little bit different for different people. And of course, in the short term, we see a lot of these things. This is a Zoom meeting, but there are lots of different types of web platforms that we could use. This is what we're doing now. And I suspect as the new normal emerges, I suspect that we're probably going to see this to be a consistent factor going forward. I mean, I know that I, over the years, have used web meetings many times. You know, we're talking back 6, 7, 8, 9 years. I would do web meetings with 100, 200, 300 people. And some of these were just regular meetings. Some of them were webinars. Some of them were sales related. Some of them were client service related. We're going to see more of that as people recognize, hey, this isn't as hard as it was a few years ago. And as they start to see how much cost they can save. Now, let's be realistic. it's not as effective in many ways, me being here and I'm in Pittsburgh in a suburb. It's not as effective as me being here and you being in New York or Los Angeles or some other part of Pittsburgh as it would be for us to be face to face. There's a continuum there, and we're not going to talk about that continuum today, but there's a continuum. And in today's world, the Zoom meeting or the web meeting is one that's on a broader part of the continuum that used to be, but some are more effective than others. So let's take a little bit of time and talk about a handful of strategies that we can use to be able to be more effective at getting that next meeting, to be able to be more strategic about how I make sure that the meetings I get are the best meetings for me and the people that I'm dealing with get a sense of accomplishment, significant accomplishment from meeting with me. And also to add in the ability to do some effectiveness as well. So in here is a little bit of time management, a lot of strategy, a lot of focus and prioritization, but let's get into those individually. So let's start with two that we're not going to spend a lot of time on here, but there are two that are just drop dead obvious, I think, for most of you. And that is, if your fishing holes dry up or they're not stocked and you're just not catching anything, you're going to need to find other fishing holes. You may need to find more of them because they may be smaller. They may not be as well stocked. You need to find some that are better for the circumstance that you're in. So the example here is, I can no longer go to trade shows and conferences because my trade shows and conferences are being canceled or turned into virtual, and the opportunity to do networking at these conferences are drying up. So you're going to have to look for some others. Now, it could be by going to places like Eventbrite and Meetup and other places and getting networking. It could be adding new types of groups that you're part of. It could be your local chamber of commerce if you do local business. It could be a trade group that you may not have joined before. Some of them are opening up their virtual conferences where they were highly paid affairs before. Maybe they're discounting them because they know that they've got some problems as well. There were billions of dollars of trade shows that were canceled over the last 6 months. And they will continue to be in that mode. So you need to find some better fishing holes. And you also need to allocate more prospecting time. If you were somebody who prospected 20% of your time, you're probably going to need to spend 30 to 40% of your time. If you were somebody who used 40 to 50% of your time, you're probably going to be the majority of your time. And if you're somebody who spent most of your time in prospecting, guess what? You're going to be working extra hours because you're going to need to spend more time doing prospecting. That's the thing, is prospecting is one of the activities with the least percentage payout. It's one of the hardest to do. It's one of the most time consuming to do for most organizations, not for all, but for most organizations, that's the case. So you're just going to have to start putting more effort into that. We're not going to go, as I said, into these two very deeply at this point. We potentially could be doing some webinars on those later, and we do those in our masterclass. But here are 5 other places that we want to talk about in a little bit more deeply today, related to better ways for you to get that first conversation. And they start with things like prioritizing who you should be spending your time getting those conversations with, and even more so, bifurcating or changing the way you go after them because they are not all alike. It seems like they're all alike because they're all on that list, but maybe they're not. And if anybody saw in Pursuit of Happiness, when they saw Will Smith go up and down a list when he was trying to prospect, and he decided instead of going in order, he was going to skip down to one who looked better than others. Well, there are differences between people that you go after. He happened to make the difference because he said, I'm going to go after this one first. But we're going to show you in a few minutes how it's not just going after them first. but it's going after them in a different way with a more concerted effort. We'll talk about data. We'll talk about using best practices, removing the friction from them so that they can say yes more easily. And then finally, we'll spend a little bit of time about this thing called a cadence, which we've talked with a lot of people about. A cadence is a very, very helpful, pretty much everybody uses it, but doesn't realize they're using it related to their prospecting. Basically like a bicycle, you pedal over and over again. They talk about a cadence is how many revolutions you make. We've got a new paradigm today that we're going to talk about using music, but it's all the same thing. So let's talk about these things. So first, prioritization. So we all do prioritization. Most of the time we do it in our head. Sometimes we do it with customer relationship management or CRM systems. And we do it based on a number of factors. Here are some of those things that you want to do. You want to be able to prioritize people based on how qualified they are and the closeness they have to a good product fit, for instance, for you. And one of the challenges that we find is that while you may see the product fit there, the person on the other end hasn't had a chance to talk to you yet, and therefore may not see that, causing a different issue, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So you want to prioritize them based upon how well qualified they are. You want to prioritize them based upon what the potential total lifetime value of working with them is. Again, this works for career decisions just as easily as it works for buying decisions. That could also mean what the potential purchase size is. There are some of you who might have, repeating customers. So they may buy $10,000 worth in the first run, and they may buy, that same $10,000 year after year after year. There are some that might only be $50 and will buy year after year after year. There are some that will buy $100,000 and never buy a second time. But you've got these two concepts of potential purchase size and lifetime value that if they're higher on the food chain there for you, that you should be prioritizing them. You should be talking about their buying cycle status. So where are they? Are they getting ready to buy? Should I be pushing real hard because I know that an impending purchase is happening? Or are they just kicking tires? And then finally on this list, we have the warmness of the introduction. Did it come from somebody who gave me such a warm introduction that they can't say no to me or almost can't say no to me? Should I be pushing them harder? Now, right now, this slide is here in order to talk to you about the fact that we should be prioritizing some people over others. I'm going to give you, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how we can more effectively go after the people who should be higher in the prioritization chain by using a combination of tools, tactics, strategies, and frankly, effort, a more concerted effort, because they're more important to you than others. You've heard about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, the long tail. They're all similar, but they all come up with the same concept. And that is 20% of your customers give you 80% of your business, or something to that effect. You can extrapolate it however you want. The reality is not everybody is as important to you, and you're not going to be as important to the other person potentially, or more important, depending upon a lot of these factors from their perspective as well. So these are important prioritization factors. But you should be, when looking at how do I go after these people, you should be saying to yourself, how do I specifically take the priority people and get to them in a more concerted fashion? Interestingly enough, when you're dealing with a lot of processes and sales, they'll give you a list and they'll say, here's the list. And they treat everybody as if they're the same, but they're not. Somebody who you just happen to network with on LinkedIn might not be as important as somebody who you got from a prioritized list. Somebody who's on the prioritized list is not likely to be as important to you as somebody who you got as a warm reference. Because a warm reference came to you because the person who referred you thinks that you can help them. And it just goes like that. Okay. Using data. Now, in the past, using data was a competitive advantage. Not anymore. Using data is table stakes. Now it's not a question of if you use data, because if you don't use data, you simply are at a competitive disadvantage from almost anybody that's out there if you're in a B2B sales environment. If you're in a job search environment, if you don't use data, you are likely to not win. Now, that being said, there are different types of data, and there are different ways to use data. So now the challenge is, how do you collect and utilize data that is effective? How do you then get a competitive data set for you? And then what data will help you in specific scenarios? So for instance, it's easy to say, yeah, I'll go to LinkedIn and find out a little bit more about the person before I make the call, or maybe while I'm dialing the number, or right before the meeting, or what have you. Yeah, that's right. Or maybe I'll use that kind of data and website data in order to be able to find out whether they're the right people. That's great. That's important. Okay. But isn't it great to be able to say, hey, look, this data means that I should take this action, but a different data outcome means I should take a different action instead. Or look, this person has interacted with my email. This is the way they've interacted with it. Because of the way they've interacted with it, I should do something different than if they did something different. That's what we talk about with actions and reactions from the prospect. We can talk about preferences from the prospect. You can get a lot of that from LinkedIn. History and data that you can find. You can create your own history. One of the things that we do is we say, if you're in a prospecting cadence, you create your own history. And if you've worked with somebody before, you keep the history, whether it's in a CRM system or elsewhere, we say a combination of what they've done in the past, because if you do that, you'll have better outcomes later. You can talk about where they are in the buying corridor, what their status is. Are they getting ready to buy or not? You can make comparisons in many ways. And here's one of the things that I find is real interesting, is that sometimes we as individuals confuse correlation with cause and effect. Just because the stock market and skirt lengths historically for 60 years went in lockstep doesn't mean they're at all correlated. But that's what happened for a long time, many decades. There's no cause-effect relationship there. And I've seen where people have confused the cause with the effect. This is happening, so that must be what's going to happen next. It's really the opposite sometimes. And that's something you need to take a look at. So the way that you look at the kind of data you have, the way that you look at the data, the methodology in which it's presented to you, those all are important. And here's actually a good example of that. And it's something that we use at Confirmed as a basis of what we believe is one of the strongest ways to be able to get meetings. And it's interesting because it's not rocket science, and the math is simple. Nobody ever does the math. We did the math. And it's based on a decades old sales concept of when you leave the room and want to get a second meeting with the prospect, you say, are you available Tuesday at 2 or Tuesday at 3? Or you say, are you available next Tuesday or next Thursday? You never say, how about we meet next Tuesday? Because then the chances are too high of them saying no. So we look at the math and we look at the data and we say, well, choices of time slot, for instance, there is a huge incremental benefit of offering them a second time slot, because when you do, you've doubled your chances. If you're dealing with somebody who is very busy, if they're a decision maker, maybe next week they are already 80% booked up. So you're trying to find a time that they can meet when only 20% of their calendar is available just to start. That's the starting point. So if you give them 2 choices, you've doubled your impact. If you give them 3 choices, you've added another 50% to the impact over 2. And as you can see from this slide, from this graph, that the impact of every additional slot goes down. It's still there at the beginning, but once you get towards 7, 8, 9 slots, then incremental value is getting closer to 0. And then you start to worry about things like decision paralysis, decision fatigue. You know, there's a reason that Steve Jobs wore black t-shirts, black turtlenecks, like it was, day after day after day, because he realized that why use your energy in the morning to pick a wardrobe when it's going to keep you from making better decisions throughout the day? Because we do, the psychologists have all told us, and behavioral analysts have already told us, that we have trouble making decisions. So why would I want to give him my entire calendar and let him try to figure out which slot matches up well? Because the incremental advantage of the slots that go after 4 or 5 or between them, all of those additional slots don't add up to the incremental advantage of the third slot, for instance. So think about that as you go. But there are other ways to be able to give them a value of choice, and that is a value of place. Is it more convenient for them to do it on the east side of town or the west side of town? Example. Is it more value, and back to timing? Do they like to do their meetings in the afternoon versus the morning? Do they like to do their meetings on a specific day of the week? We'll talk about those as well. Then you can even get to the point when they do their meetings, do they like to do coffee meetings? Yay, let's have a coffee meeting. I'll treat them really nicely. Great. You know, there are lots of people who absolutely love Starbucks and will go out of their way to go for a Starbucks coffee. And there are others who will turn you down because they dislike Starbucks so badly. So giving them a choice of Starbucks of Pete's, Starbucks or Coffee Tree, Starbucks or Panera, Dunkin' Donuts or Panera, just as examples, those also help you. And we'll get into that in a couple minutes, actually. But choice is important. And that's actually what we talk about, removing the friction. So that's actually the second thing here. It's all about them. It's not about you. Those of you who are, you're familiar with the fact that I've done a lot of work with Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie is all about the other person. So are most of the other sales franchisees, by the way, those training organizations. It's all about the other person. It's not about you. Give them the choice. Be consistent about the way that you do it. Make it so that they can see things in a way that's consistent for them. I'll show you that in a little bit as well. Give them guidance. Don't make them do all the heavy lifting and the work by themselves. You give them an entire calendar and that's asking them to do your work. I'm sorry, but there are too many people who try to do that. Make your communications clear, concise, and make sure you're prompt. And one of the things that you may have noticed is that for those of you who registered here for this webinar through Eventbrite, we noticed the problem that Eventbrite was telling people you got to be logged into there. We noticed that when they sent out something at noon. And about 12:30, about a half hour later, we decided in that time period, we need to be prompt. We need to be proactive. It's not about waiting until there's a problem. It's about factoring in the timing. It's about being prompt. I'll give you an example. How many times do you remember, it's probably a lot for most of you, where you might have a meeting across town? And you show up across town and the person doesn't show up. So you make a phone call and they say, oh, I forgot to tell you about it. You know, I meant to call you, but so you've done the travel and you're out of luck. So, you know, giving them a reminder the day before has its advantages over giving them a reminder an hour before, because you can't do much an hour before if there's a problem. You can the day before. Then finally, let's go into this idea of cadence. So think about music and think about a symphony. A symphony is a bunch of different sections, a bunch of different instruments within each section. They all have to be at a certain timing. They all have to come in at the right spot. They all have to work together in order to be able to create a symphony. And if one person in one of those sections is off, it's suddenly a cacophony. Suddenly it's noise. Suddenly it just doesn't sound the way it's supposed to. Or just as bad if the timing is off. Somebody comes in a half step too late or a step too late, it's off. So in music, they have this thing called a cadence. You know what a metronome is. And we're going to follow this whole concept of a cadence in what we talk about now in terms of prospecting. So here's an example, and it is a little tongue-in-cheek, but it is an example about how that is consistent with the way that we see most people making their cadences. They don't, first of all, they don't know it's a cadence, and that's okay. You don't need to know that it's real, that's the name of it. It's just, oh, I know this is the process that I use when I'm making my phone calls or sending my emails or getting to people at LinkedIn. Many of you probably don't even have a process. It's probably something that you just do it as you go. But I know that you've probably received the emails from those people who do have the process that says, I'm going to send this guy an email. And when they don't reply to me, I'm going to send them an email saying, did you receive my last email? And I'm going to get another one out afterwards that say, hey, look, I'm not getting a response from you. Did you receive my last email? Maybe they'll sound a little angrier, and then maybe they give up. Or maybe they'll try it again over and over and over again, not adding any value, not making anything work any better, but it'll be that way. And frankly, we see more people like this than in the other direction. So when you think about a cadence, this is not a cadence, or let's put it this way, this is not an acceptable cadence. Steps 1 through 5 with no real other info or guidance is not very good. So I'm going to give you an example right now of an enhanced cadence, and then we'll talk about how you build it. And then afterwards, I'll talk with you about a tool that if you're interested, we'd love to have you work with so that you can do this better. And if you don't want the tool, you can do it without the tool. You'll probably recognize that the cadence example that we have is going to work better than yours. And hopefully you'll see the advantages of being able to do it through a tool. But we'll do that afterwards. So our cadence is different in a number of ways. First thing you're going to see is that our cadence is not based on steps. Our enhanced cadence is based on days. It says that on a given date, you do a certain thing. Now, keep in mind that this cadence that we're putting through here is a cadence related to one person that you're trying to reach out to. And when you try to reach out to him or her, your idea is that on day 0 or day 1, this is the first time you reach out to them, and that everything in the cadence follows after that. So when we go back to our music example, if you're doing 10 calls a day, then some people are going to go into your cadence on Tuesday, and this cadence will start on Tuesday. For the next set of people, your cadence will start on Wednesday. For the next set of people, your cadence will start on Thursday, so that they may be at a different spot in this cadence. So you need to be able to track them appropriately and work with them appropriately so that they're in the right spot when you do. You'll also notice in our cadence that we tend to be more aggressive or assertive on the front end. That is, we believe that based on the research that as you get to leave messages, get in contact with them, as they see your name, even if they didn't know you before, they build a relationship with you, even if they're not responding. You have probably encountered what I've encountered many times with an assertive campaign. When you get to them after 30 days or 60 days, they'll go to you, oh, I'm so sorry. I owe you something. Maybe you bump into them at a networking event. You've been leaving messages from me. I've been so busy. I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you. You see that all the time. So don't worry about the fact that they haven't gotten back to you. That is not necessarily an indication that they're considering you a lowlife. It's not anything that you're bothering them. It's just that things can be different. They could have different priorities. They can have different ways that it may not be convenient. There are lots of reasons. There are lots of reasons why they may not be responding. But the process that we have here gives you a good sense of how you can respond. So on day 1, and by the way, when we create our prospecting cadence in particular, we base it on the idea of no means go farther in the cadence, or lack of success means go farther in the cadence. Success means it's a jumping off place in order to start doing some other process, such as working with them as a client or working with them as some, known entity that you're no longer in a process of trying to get that first conversation. So these are all, you'll see some serious negativity in these, and that's done on purpose because that's what causes the cadence to be needed. So on day 1, we'll do a cold call, let's say, not an email. In this particular cadence, it's not an email. It's a pick up the phone first. But if we reach their voicemail, we don't say, call me back. We say, I'll tell you what, we know you're busy. We'll send you some times to talk. Don't bother, try to call me back. Look in your inbox. And then we'll send them something the first day. And we'll give them a choice. We'll give them a choice of 3 slots because we know that they're going to be 80% already busy. So we'll triple our likelihood. On day 3, if it hasn't been confirmed yet, and if we haven't heard from them, then we have an automated reminder go out. You can send it by email, whatever. But the point is we follow up on day 3. So we've skipped the day and we go to day 3. On day 4, we check the data. Absolutely check the data. Have they interacted with either the original offer? Have they looked at the reminder? And if so, based upon what they're doing, should we email them again? Should we try to get to them by LinkedIn? Should we switch to phone again, or even send them an SMS text? Are there other things that we should do? These are just some of the more common things to do. So you'll notice that we skip a day for that. And then we have 4 days later, then we check the data again. What's happening? What happened based upon what we did 4 days ago? Then the next set here is 6 or 7 days. We're looking at the data again. Maybe this time we'll do a phone call and do a different type of voicemail. By the way, all of our voicemails are scripted. Or at least, you may not use the script, but you at least have a script to go by. Based on that data that we see on day 21, should we go back to the email and say, hey, look, we know you've got a difficult schedule. Let me tell you why it's important. Or I'll tell you what, I had this infographic that seemed like it would work for you. Once we get together, I'll see whether I should send it to you and whether it makes sense or something to that effect. There's all sorts of different ways you can do that. And you can continue on down that. We generally map ours out pretty structurally through the first month. And then after that, it starts to get wider between slices, but we do have additional steps that go into it. Because, there are reasons that they don't call you back. They have a big project that takes 2 or 3 weeks. They're on vacation. There's some health problem. They're on sabbatical. They have to deal with something with their family. They just got the promotion and they're buried under their new job. There are lots of reasons why 30 days isn't a good indicator that they won't call you back. So there are other ways to be able to go forward after that. You just have to be a little bit less aggressive because they anticipate you're going to be. And some other things that you can add into that cadence in order to be able to make it work better, because you're adding value. Important thing. Hey, we're conducting an event on such and such a date. Would you like to join us? That's what we call an impending event. It's something to make them act. Or I have a white paper that may interest you. Might be another reason for them to call you back. I'll share the data with you when we talk. You can even include that in some of your emails. Or, hey, look, I'm going to be in your city on such and such a date. If you're available on that date, I can bring my CEO with me, or something to that effect. We'll be in for the conference that you're going to be in for, that we're hoping you're going to be. Can we set up a time at that conference? How about if you connect in with me with LinkedIn and at least get that conversation going? Sometimes that works. I do a lot of that, but I'm not going to say that. Most of my LinkedIn are people coming to me as opposed to me going to them. But I do that with some key people, again, value-added people, the priority people. Or can I put you on my email list? So how do you create a cadence? It's actually not very hard, but again, it's a process. So this is how we recommend creating that cadence. Number 1, get out your spreadsheet, and then you make a month-long matrix, 1 through 30 days down the left-hand column in the first column. Your second column will say, what actions do I need to take? What things do I think would be successful in this cadence, and in what order? And then what do I do if it is successful? And what do I do if it's not successful? So that I now have a recipe, a roadmap, if you will, that says, this is what I'm going to do at every step along the way. And this is when it's going to happen. And this is what happens if I do or do not do this. And if I encounter X or Y when I get there. And then don't forget to script it, put in templates and put in your methods and places, have your voicemail scripts. I'll show you in our system, we actually keep templates to make it that much easier. And then when it's all said and done, you map it all against this spreadsheet type of format. And now you've got your cadence. So you've got the day, you've got the action to take on that day in that second column. You've got in the third column, what do I do if I'm successful? And then what do I do if I fail? Voicemail scripts you have there available. If you've got a tool like Confirmed in order to be able to do your templates for email and for invitations, then you can do that as well. Okay. So generally, those are strategies that you can use in order to make sure that you're getting more effectiveness out of your efforts, being efficient, prioritizing the right people so that you can get the right people and prioritize them on your, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, especially prioritization in a few minutes, because we don't believe that there's one way to do things. We believe you should do things based upon which bucket they're in, and your strategy related to not only being efficient, but more importantly, being effective, being strategic, managing your time, not just to shrink the amount of time that it takes you to schedule, but or to make the phone calls, but to make it so that your entire work week works better, that you're spending more of your time with the people who are on your priority list. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it for coffee meetings, face-to-face, Zoom meetings, what have you, in your office, in their office. Look, right now we know we're doing fewer of the live face-to-face meetings. We're doing them with fewer people, but they're going to come back at some point. We don't know when. And in the meantime, we need to make sure that we do both of them in the best way possible. So over the years, we created this idea called Confirm. So remember that we're in the consulting business. For years, we've been helping people with their marketing and sales strategies and tactics and processes, and helping them build their machines. And we realized in doing this that if we can help get the conversation going and schedule appointments better, then we've handled one of the most important parts of the process. And so we created Confirmed. And Confirmed is a software as a service tool. Basically, that means that it's a web subscription. It makes scheduling easier, it makes it more effective, and it makes it more strategic, as we'll see in a moment or two. And we like to say that it combines the best practices that you should be using, those that you should be making habits out of, with insights, automations, and analytics that will help you do those best practices more often, more consistently, etc. We wanted to make sure that we work with your current tools. So we have it so it'll work with your current calendar. For instance, if you use Outlook or Apple Calendar or Google, with your CRM system, we actually have an agreement with Salesforce to work with them, and with your web meeting platform, in which we work with 20 of them on a very visceral basis. One of the things we found, we were actually aiming to get a 2 to 5% increase in meeting acceptance rates, and we were very successful. We're actually getting meeting acceptance rates increases of 14 to 25% because of a combination of processes and data and getting things to you and helping people throughout the course of the week. And again, as I said, it's based on research, it's based on metrics. It took us a long time to start putting the tool together. After we started with the idea of, hey, this is broken, we need to fix it. So you're looking here at a number of quotes from various types of people who have used the system, and some of whom actually have received offers through our system. For instance, that third one down, it's actually a quote from my own history, in which I went into a Fortune 100 bank executive meeting with him. We set it up with Confirmed, and then we were getting out of the meeting. It was an associate of mine and I. We were getting out of the meeting and getting ready to leave. And I said, oh, well, okay, should we set up our next meeting? And his response was, oh, no, let's not do it here. Let's do it with that app that you had before. Well, I wasn't there because of Confirmed. It was still in formula, and he didn't even realize I had anything to do with it. As far as he was concerned, I was with this other organization, and he's going, no, let's make it with that app. And I'm going, oh, you mean my app? And he's going, no, not your app, this app that you used in order to create today's meeting. And I said, yeah, that's my app. And actually, he was talking about Confirmed. We got some really neat things. CPA Practice Advisor was using competitor names, the first movers and the biggest companies, saying that we're better than them. The market analysts are telling us that we're changing the game and how powerful the tool was. And I love the one at the top. An enterprise company CTO says, you're solving one of our house on fire problems. Love to see it. So let me just give you some sense of how that works. We still have a few minutes left. So here we are. I'm showing you just two ideas of what we can do. Remember, a few minutes ago, we talked about the idea of not everybody being alike. So we think about people not being alike as being, if in fact we have a priority person, we're going to treat them differently than if we have somebody who is nice to have and who's important to have, but isn't quite as important. Maybe it's a $20,000 deal instead of a $200,000 deal. Or maybe it's somebody who is just kicking tires versus somebody who is down towards the, short straws of trying to choose between X, Y, and Z, 2 or 3 vendors. Or maybe it's somebody who just came in the transom through the web versus not. So these two images that you see here are only meant to display two different scenarios that said, that say treat them differently. And I'm going to show you how that works in just a minute. So the one that was on the right is what we would call the priority scenario, where you can go after somebody and you can give them hand-picked multiple choices of where to do. I'm showing it to you with 2 choices here. Normally I would try it with 3 if they're high priority people, but here you see that I'm giving them 2 choices of Wednesday at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And I'm giving it to them in such an easy to confirm method where all they need to do is click one button and it'll say whether I want to do it at 9 a.m. at the Panera in place 1 or in the 9 a.m. at the Panera in place 2. I've given them a choice of time, which means I've doubled my chances of getting a free time on their schedule. And I've given them choice of coffee on both sides of town because I don't know whether they want to meet with me near their home or near their office. I know that sometimes they work from home. So this just gives you some sense. In this particular case, I didn't give 2 different coffee choices. I just gave Panera. Maybe I knew for this particular person that they love Panera and they love their rolls or whatever it is. But I could be saying, do you want Dunkin' or you want Starbucks, for instance, just to give you some sense. But I'm giving them something that's drop dead easy to read. I'm giving them something where once they click that confirm button, it sends us both confirmation emails, it puts them on our calendars, does everything that we need. And by the way, in this process, if they for some reason don't respond to this, they will get an automated reminder on the morning of the second day after I send this, assuming that there's still open slots. So if this was for tomorrow, they wouldn't get it because tomorrow's slots would be behind us. So there are some things that we do that make it drop dead. First of all, we make it easy for them. We make it easy for you. I'll show you that in a minute. But the key is that we're giving them choices and we are making it easy for them. And we're taking advantage of the things that make them a priority person. Now, here's how you might create that offer that I just showed you. Let's say that I've got a meeting in a particular, the Panera in the Galleria, it says here, with Warren and Bill, friends of mine, at 3 o'clock on Monday. So I can give them an offer by sliding over to 2 different slots right before Warren and Bill. Right after Warren and Bill, I can slide over the Galleria because I know that I'm already going to be there. Why don't I just set them up so that my time is good and I know that I've already got this? So when I'm offering to Albert, that's easy. But Albert might want to have some meetings at this Nova place across town, but I'm going to need some time to get there. So I make that one at 1 o'clock. Now I'm giving him 3 choices. 2 of them are where I'm going to meet right around Bill and Warren, and the other one, I have to build in some travel time. So automatically, I'm giving choices. I'm making it easy. It takes me just a couple seconds to do, and I'm ready to go, but I've given them choices that are easy to do. Now, suppose on the other hand, we say, well, we want to meet between 1 and 4 o'clock on Tuesday. So here and this will go through it a couple times as I talk. So I know it's a little fast, but here I can use my cursor to mouse down, slide over the area between 1 and 4. It will pop up. I can choose a dialog box, choose a place. In this particular case, it's a Crazy Mocha. And then I say, give them a start time every 60 minutes. And notice in a second, there are going to be 3 slots. 1 for 1 o'clock, 1 for 2 o'clock, 1 for 3 o'clock. So that's when they're going to see those 3 confirm buttons for those 3 times. And I can show you this stuff on demos if anybody is interested in seeing it. And here's an important one. They're priority, so I'm going to save those 3 times. So here I've given George Westinghouse 3 times on, let's say, Tuesday and Wednesday, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock on Tuesday, 9 o'clock on Wednesday. Then I'm saying, George, let's meet. Here are some times. And when I go to any of the next steps, any other thing that I schedule, any other thing that I attempt to schedule, I want to avoid these 3 slots because George is priority for me. And by the way, this is something that I can set up to be seen on my Outlook calendar, or my Google calendar, or my Apple calendar, for instance. Now, George, they stay there, reserved for George until he decides I'm going to pick one. And when he picks that one, we get an email, we get a notification, plus the other slots that he hasn't chosen disappeared, therefore making them available for somebody else again. So again, for our priority type of person, this is well worth the little bit of effort that it takes to do that. And we are making them a real good friend as we do this. Now, there are going to be some people that don't take this priority and that you're just going to want to say, hey, I want to let them sign up by my website, or I want to let them pick from a schedule of interview slots that happen on Thursday, or I want to be able to put something in my email signature in order to be able to let them do this. So we have a flexible walk-up scheduler in addition, and you're looking at this one, which is, understand we can make lots of these. So for any given person. So in this one, I'm saying for this type of person, let's say it's for, I know I've got access to one of my demonstrators and I only have them on Tuesday and Friday afternoons. So I'm going to put together a link. They click on it and this shows up with Tuesday and Friday afternoons available. In this particular case, you see that they picked 2 o'clock on Friday, but they could have picked an hour-long slot on Tuesday or maybe a half-hour-long slot on Tuesday without having to go to any other pages or any click. It's all there. They see, they can pick a virtual location or a physical location and then fill in a little bit of information, click confirm, and it's done. So it's a single screen. We give them a choice of place, choice of length of meeting. We can automatically adjust it so that when somebody says, I'm going to pick this one, then that slot disappears from the next person who walks up. And by the way, the George Westinghouse slots that are already being saved for him will also disappear. They won't be able to schedule them if they're in this area as well. So this person's not getting as much priority as George did. So I'm also doing the same thing as I said before. Then when we're done, we have an offer history, and this history will show you everybody that I've sent an offer to, and it will show you everybody who clicked through those flexible calendars. So some of them might have opened the reminder, some of them might be sitting there in their inbox waiting to be delivered, and I'll know whether they've interacted, so I know what to do as my next step. I know who's still pending, I know who's confirmed, a lot of good data here, and I'll even know if I've made a number of outreaches to them before. I'll have a history of which days and times they've accepted and which ones they haven't, and how quickly and how often I need to send them reminders and how quickly they respond to those reminders, just as examples of data that I can get along the way. Then from that action menu, if I want to, Michael still hasn't looked at it. Maybe I'll come in here and there's an action button on Michael. You can't see it because it's obscured by this, but I might go in here and copy the link and send it to him by LinkedIn, or put it into an SMS text message, or maybe just send a smart reminder because maybe he just overlooked it in his 400 emails that are sitting there. I can also change and cancel meetings, change and cancel offers. So there are lots of things that I can do here with both the priorities and knots. And of course, as I said, we can integrate with calendars. So here you're looking that I can turn on and off in my, this is actually a page from Outlook on the iPhone, where I can turn on or turn off those pendings so that they can either, if you think there are too many and a little cluttered, you can take them off when you don't need them and you can turn them on when you do. And here within Salesforce.com, I can actually have it set up so that within your leads or your contact records, you have a confirm tab. You put that in, and then whenever it comes up, it'll have automatic access to your templates, automatic access to the people. It's a really cool way to be able to use confirm from in there. And then reports, you have a sense of, again, data is important. You have a sense of what's been confirmed versus what's been sent. If you're in a management position, you can sort of use it. You can get cause-effect relationships. And it also logs it to your CRM. And also you can do some coaching based on this information. This is not enough that's in your CRM. Stuff like this and other information that we provide also makes it different. So on the bottom line is, when you look at where you are, here are the places that confirmed can help you out in that sense. So here's what we're going to do. I know that we're running about 2 minutes late here. I am going to send you an offer in that priority mode. I'll give you a couple times to choose from. This will demo for you. I'll ask you to only use the virtual because we don't want to use the face-to-face stuff. Choose your favorite virtual, and then whatever time slot you choose, we'll discuss your need. And by the way, I am also happy to provide an 80% discount for you for the first year, only for people who have attended this event. to thank you for attending this event. So just real quickly, Shannon, is there anything else that we need to do? I know I ran here about 2 minutes long. Anything before we shut this off, or for those who are still with us?
Oh, we do not have any questions in the chat, so I think we are good.
Okay. Well, we thank you all for being with us. And if there's anything we can do, let us know. You'll be hearing from me using a confirmed strategic offer. And hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit about how we can help you. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.